Good morning. So before we get started with this, what's sure to be a very compelling conversation, I'd love to have each of our panelists introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about why they're here today, what expertise they're bringing.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. I'm Scott Thompson. I'm the CEO of Tuition.io. And if you've never heard of us, we help employers offer education assistance benefits to their workforce. And I'm sure in the conversation we're going to have, you'll hear a little bit more about what that means.
Hey everyone, I am
Baby.
Well, I can talk loud. I'm Tyler Zalucky. I am a total rewards consultant at Marshall McLennan Agency. So I work with HR from an employee benefits perspective, and a lot of times it intersects with well-being.
Hi everyone, I'm Stephanie Christmas. I'm the Global Head of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for Inizio, which is a life sciences strategic partner.
Hi everyone, I am Cora Claus. I am a VP of HR at Burlington Stores and also a small business owner as well. I feel like they sat us next to each other for a reason.
No kidding. Good morning, I'm Magda Dekce. I'm Senior Vice President of HR and Communications for Saint-Gobain. So I'm a little bit like Scott. If you never heard about Saint-Gobain, we are a manufacturing organization. We operate in 76 different countries. And here in North America, we have 150 locations and 20,000 employees. So when it comes to well-being, I think we have quite a population to care for.
So today's discussion, as previously noted, is all about well-being in the workplace. But the American Psychological Association found in its survey last year that the majority of people believe their organization thinks the workplace environment is healthier than it actually is. With that in mind, let's start with some of the tangible ways companies and organizations can be working on this. What are some of the specific policies and benefits that employers might be able to offer to advance this goal? Magna, let's start with you. And
Sure, thank you. So I think many of us know that the workplace has changed, and COVID was a catalyst to a lot of it, and having different generations in the workplace also means that people are expecting different things, and there is a lot of demand on the employers to provide environment where people are feeling healthy and supported. So for us, we're looking at the well-being in the less traditional way. I think in the traditional way was really just looking at the physical well-being. So we're looking at it through the lens of social, emotional, and financial well-being. So if you think about financial, just to pick on one, that was the area that our employees told us they want to learn the most about. So providing tools like tangible tools like budgeting and understanding how you can stretch your own budget is one of the tangible things that I think we're tapping into it.
other examples that each of you would like to touch on? Tyler?
Yeah, I can talk through. So I think when you think about well-being and its construction, it actually has to start with what's your feedback loop. So what I mean by that is how are you capturing the sentiment of your employees and colleagues through the well-being lens? So when I think about my own organization, what we do is a lot of times the respective managers will fill out a survey or talk to their individuals on their team. They will capture that sentiment and then aggregate it up. And then this is what I think is the most crucial point. During our town halls, our CEO, our CFO, as well as our director of HR, they are fundamentally pointing out, this is what you said, and this is what we're doing. So it has led to paternity leave. It has led to an increased contribution on the 401k. It has led to, on December 24th, instead of being a half day, it's a full day. So you can see it really kind of bolsters of, all right, my voice matters. Because what happens is, if it goes into the ether and then nothing happens, then your employees are not going to feel like they're being heard as an organization. And then sitting in my seat as an employee benefits professional, one of the most popular benefits I would say that I'm seeing instituted across the board is looking at fertility and inclusive family building benefits. So what I mean by that, it's in a couple of different facets. So 1 in 6 individuals will struggle with infertility, and it's 50-50 men and female. And when we look at it from a health benefit perspective, so your health insurance program, oftentimes the IUI, the IVF, the more advanced techniques that may be required to family build aren't necessarily embedded in your medical program. Meaning, if I'm an individual that all I want to do is family build, and that's what means the most to me in this world, and I can't afford it, looking through that, huge attraction lever. So I've had organizations that will say, we want this top person, and this is being asked from a talent perspective. Or, second note, we've instituted it, and they are so happy that we've been part of and supportive of that journey that they're not going to leave.
I think that's really important where you said listen to your employees and see what they need. And I think one of the things that I come at this is thinking it's not one size fits all for all employees. And so if you don't know what the employee population is actually looking for, you might be investing in the wrong places and you might be thinking about it in the wrong way. So really making sure before you, and again, thinking about well-being holistically. It's not just, physical health, it's also mental health, it's also, financial health, it's also career growth. So it's what is someone coming to the table at that may be distracting them because they don't feel 100%. And so how are we helping them as employers? And sometimes it's just as simple as asking someone as their manager, what can I do to better support you? What is most important in your life right now? And trying to figure out how you can create that culture and environment where people can feel empowered to ask for what they need.
Yeah, one of the things that I think is important for any organization that's serving a population of individuals in their workforce is really thinking about who is my employee population, who is my associate population, and what do they need and what do they want? So you get that through the engagement surveys, through the feedback loops that happen, but one of the key pieces about designing programs and policies is really understanding who is here as part of my org. So I work for a retailer. We're largely female-based. And for the longest time, we had 1 million people going out on a leave of absence, starting their families, and they're not getting paid but a minimum wage at that point. So we've now implemented new policies that support that because we are such a large female population and they are being adversely impacted by it. So it's just taking that step back and say, as you're designing your programs, as you're writing your policies, who are you writing them for?
Mm-hmm.
So I mentioned a minute ago that, am I working? They turned mine off and yours on. I mentioned a minute ago that our business is about helping employers offer education assistance benefits. And really that falls into 2 categories. So I would consider half of our business financial well-being around the cost of education and the resulting student loan debt and loan forgiveness programs that the Department of Education has had for a long time that borrowers have a hard time qualifying for. And, oftentimes when I'm talking with employers, there's this aha moment of, geez, I just didn't know. And if I asked all of you how much student loan debt is there today, you'd get close. It's about $1.8 trillion. Pretty quickly, it's going to be 50 million US consumers will have student loan debt. 50 million. You might think this is that early career age group, so 18 to 25. That's not it at all. It's sprinkled throughout your workforce. And by the way, the fastest growing age segment for student loan debt is 55 and above. That's parents, of course, taking on more and more debt for their kids that are going to school. The other side of our business is around education. So how do you help your workforce through education continue to upskill, advance their careers, and do more and more important jobs for their employers? And I think when you kind of pull it all apart, for me, if you wake up in the morning and you realize you're struggling financially, or you might conclude, I'm just broke, it's pretty hard to get in your car if you're going to work every day and drive to work and not think about that. And by the way, it's really hard to not think about it all day long. And so how can you actually do well, do your job and do a good job if you're worried about supporting your family and doing kind of the core of, living? And so that's what we try to impress employers, that you have to address these core financial issues And as I said, one of them is the student loan piece.
So, another part of creating a healthy work environment, of course, is people feeling like they are included in that environment. And how do you create that in a workplace as a business leader and also as a team? Stephanie, I'd love to start with you on this one.
Yeah, absolutely. So, little interactive. How many people here have a dedicated inclusion team, DEI team at their organization? Wonderful. So great to see it. And how many people have been at one of their events, sponsoring one of their events, having their bosses come and sponsor one of their events? Okay, so a little bit less. So one thing I would say is, as we know, DEI is kind of under this microscope and under this, but really what it comes down to is the inclusion and how are people being able to bring themselves to work in a way that feels comfortable for them. So a lot of times people say, bring your whole self to work. Well, not everyone is comfortable bringing their whole self to work, and they are pretty good bringing 55% of themselves to work. So how do we create an environment where they feel safe bringing that 55%? And one of the things that I often say with our DEI and our inclusion efforts is it can't be those people over there doing the work. It has to be seen as everyone as a part of it. So whether that means sponsoring an event, whether that means encouraging leaders, one of the things that we've found to be really impactful for our organization is having our senior leaders on just our quarterly calls, asking questions, being a part of the conversation. And when they can role model that vulnerability and that I don't necessarily know all the answers and I'm going to, which is an uncomfortable space for a lot of leaders to be in, so it does require some coaching, but really making sure that you're bringing that lens into everything you're doing and you're sort of asking, again, those questions and allowing people the space to make mistakes and to have those conversations is really, really important. And there's so many studies that show, if someone's spending the emotional energy of covering an aspect of their personality that they don't want to, so whether that's their sexual orientation, whether that's their parental or grandparent status, I've seen that a lot now in our aging workforce, is people don't want to say they're grandparents because they don't want to be seen as, going to retire or not knowing technology or all the biases that we bring into those conversations. So really thinking about how are we creating those narratives and those conversations for people to bring that part of themselves to the table. And it starts at the top.
And I would even take that another step to say, it's how you're showing up and how do you be yourself at work, but it's also how do we empower our teams to have the tough conversations that they need to have? I'm sure we've all probably been in a role in our life where, we're frustrated. Something's not going right, and it piles up, and it piles up, and it piles up because we don't have the courage to have the conversations that we need to, or there's not a safe space to have it. Or a leader that is not leading with empathy. And so how do we help someone navigate that tough situation? What we've started doing is coaching our associates on how to have those tough conversations. You can come to me in the HRBP space, I can give you advice, but at the end of the day, I'm not gonna go back and have that conversation for you until you've had it for yourself. And so I'm going to teach you how to have that conversation. And I'm going to teach our leaders how to be open to hearing it and how to appropriately respond, in addition to assuming good intent. And none of it works if you don't assume good intent. And so it's a whole cycle of how do you show up every day as a leader or as an associate on a team and have those conversations.
And I love that you're talking about the role that leaders play in this, because as HR professionals, we can put the best programs in place, we can design the best well-being strategy, but if the leaders don't buy into it, or if the leaders don't lead with that and don't implement it and insist on employees, taking advantage of those benefits, you really don't have a culture of well-being. And I think you can put the best parental leave in place, and if one of your senior leaders is going to be upset and publicly speaking about the fact that he or she has got, 3 people out on a parental leave, and that's, hindering projects or a department, it's going to send waves through the organization, how we truly feel about the well-being. And I think that's, it's not just about having the programs, it's about making sure that we talk positively about it and show examples of, how important it is to take and implement those programs and take advantage of all of those benefits that are in place, and showing up as a leader with that positive intent and that kind of duty of care that we all have as the leaders of the organization.
Yeah, and the only thing I'd mention with that is I really like the concept of a ride along, right? So there's middle management, there's senior management, but when you think about the proximity to your position, right? If someone is in your role and they are also in staffing, if someone is in your role and they're also in recruiting, if you can quasi-assign or enable somebody to, hey, could you kind of take them through the lens, have them watch behind you, mentor, that I think is essential, because in this environment, there is, I think, heightened scrutiny on oneself, right? What if I mess up? In a high-performance culture, it's a fear of being perceived in a certain way. So if you have someone that is sitting more closely to your seat, you can be yourself. You can have that truthful conversation of, this is who I am. Have you ever dealt with this? Are you going through this? So in my lens, it's a net new sales individual that has never been in our industry whatsoever. I'm sitting on every call. I'm talking through logistics. I'm explaining personality types, right? That way he feels that much more comfortable when he has to engage with a manager. So I think when you think about it, it's not only that middle management and leadership lens, it's that proximity factor which enables that trust.
So I want to come back to this concept of financial wellness that was mentioned earlier. And, how can that affect different groups within the workplace differently? What are some of the ways that you can begin starting the conversations that might allow you to address those stresses? I'll start with you, Scott.
Sure. Yeah, I mentioned before that student loan debt, and by the way, with all the noise in the media over the past few years with the current administration's programs, they've actually made, I would argue, the situation worse for borrowers than it was before. They tried really hard, but they made it worse because employers have diminished the importance of it, believing that a bunch of student loan debt was going to go away under the current administration. That, in fact, hasn't happened, won't happen, and the situation, as I mentioned, is getting worse. Look, when we look at age segments and we say, all right, how is student loans and the monthly payment that individuals need to make on their loans by age segment, how does it affect them? And if you say a recent college graduate has $45,000 of student loan debt, you can approximate their payment after tax is $500 a month. Now, I don't know about all of you, and each of us come from different circumstances, but at 25 years old, I would not have been able to make a $500 a month payment on my student loans. I just would not have been able to do it. And by the way, it doesn't get better as you get older. One of the things that is a really interesting metric, when you graduate from college, you've got student loan debt that has 10-year term on it, which means over the course of 10 years, you're going to pay it off if you make that payment. But quickly it turns into a 21-year adventure for these individuals. And that's because starting shortly after you enter the workforce, you make mistake after mistake after mistake. And by the way, it's not unusual to see people who are 10 years into their careers who have higher balances today than they did when they left school. So I'm not arguing that all of you as employers should make financial contributions to your employees' student loan debt. That would be nice. It certainly would be helpful. By the way, the retention metrics on this are spectacular. Not good, spectacular. But just offering the assistance to help those individuals understand where are they, what are their options, what's a good decision from where they are today, and how do they manage this problem financially going forward, that's a big win. And to me, if you can help that individual just get to a place where I feel better about myself financially, I can handle all of my financial obligations, including that payment I need to make, that's a really big win for those individuals.
I think something also to consider is what is our role as, good stewards of our community, and also thinking about, wealth gap. And as you start talking about financial literacy and education, as a healthcare company, we're very conscious of health equity and the social determinants of health. So even just as you're talking, I'm thinking in the back of my head, well, what are we doing about how are we enabling the young people to have financial literacy to not make those types of mistakes and decisions? Because that's going to play a role in their healthcare and their longer term life expectancy. And so what are we thinking about, not just within our employee base, but those who will eventually enter the workforce? Because we're going to inherit those problems anyway, right? So what are we doing to think about them as they're kind of growing in there? So that was just something that we should consider.
I think it's interesting that we're talking about the financial literacy and financial health of our employees, because I think it's one of those topics that haven't been touched on as much as some of the others when it comes to well-being, because it feels so personal. And you really don't know what the employee is dealing with and, what is their financial situation. I mean, you're paying them a paycheck, but how far does that dollar stretch and what is it going towards? And, it's regardless of where the employee is, whether it's your entry-level employee or whether it's your, manager or mid-level executive, they may have different commitments and the different things that they are paying for, and therefore it touches everyone. So I think one of the things that we have promoted heavily over the last year was understanding your financial health. So there are tools out there that help your employees really understand their financial health. It takes a little bit of time. They fill in the information and they understand what they should do to prepare and to have money saved up for retirement. That's one of the biggest thing that, again, we talk to our entry-level employees that, you need to start saving for your retirement now and not in 10 years' time. And that's not something that's, coming out of college or entering the workforce, people think about. It's not kind of the first thing that you're going to think, oh, I'm going to enter a workforce and immediately, jump on the 401k benefits. That's the most important thing that I have in mind. So there's that duty of, education and explaining the different benefits that we have available for the employees.
One of the interesting things that I'm thinking of as I'm listening to the conversation is, we've had in a couple of instances over the last couple of years that I've personally had to deal with situations where you have a leader who's farther along in their career, farther along in their pay, what they're earning, and you may have some more disposable income, talking about their life, right? We think that's a normal course of action. Let's talk about what's going on in our lives. So maybe we're going to our second home that's on a beach somewhere, and you're telling this to somebody who's early career that's only able to live where they live because they have 2 or 3 roommates. And so there is a division that causes that, as we continue to grow and work with our leaders and work with our teams, that there's an acknowledgement of knowing who's in the room, because that does have an impact on the people that are sitting in front of you, where you're just trying to connect, but yet there's also this divide you're creating from a financial perspective because you're at such different places.
And as I think through the generations, just like that framing, so I always view this through lens of total rewards and what I hear. So baby boomers trying to retire, right? Trying to retire and think through, all right, how much do I need to save so I can live the life that I want to? Gen X, they're often sandwiched. So they're often taking care of their children. They may also be taking care of their parents and thinking through long-term care and dealing with the stressors of that. Millennials, so I think myself personally, so I have a 4-month-old at home. That daycare bill just hit me. Okay, so that is through my head. And then Gen Z out of school thinking, and I think the general sentiment is housing prices through the roof, rent versus mortgage. So there is just I would call it a conundrum of things and sorts that's going through their minds. So as you kind of dissect each individual and think and path, there is an empowerment factor. So just to kind of give you some food for thought, what I've seen is often you can pair and look at financial wellness and attach vehicles that allow for gamification, budget strategies, and I think what's most impactful is giving some sort of financial advisor that can coach them through what's going on. But the most important component of that, because I think we all have that fear factor of, don't sell me an annuity, please don't sell me. They should not be able to sell anything. It should just be advice and expertise. So that's a big distinction. But as I think through the framing of it, and if you think through that through your workforce lens, think through the application of, and there's been common themes of financial literacy component. How are you going to drive that? How are you going to make that in a trusted room where they do have access?
You mentioned retirement. I've talked a little bit about student loans. Our newest product allows employers to match student loan payments into the retirement plan. So even if you don't elect to defer some of your salary, you can use your student loan payments in lieu of elective deferrals. So I'm not a retirement guy, anything from it. But when I started to look at the data, I was actually horrified, I think is the only way you can describe it. So when you look my age segment and you say, what are the median savings for retirement in an age segment? Let me give you a couple numbers. If you're 25 or younger, you have less than $3,000 in your retirement savings plan. And to your point, the time that matters is the earliest because that individual gets 40 years of compounded growth. The more horrifying number, however, is, remember, on the median, if you're 55 and above, you have roughly $85,000 in your retirement savings account. So I don't know where all you guys live, but where in this country can you retire on $85,000 in retirement savings plus Social Security? It's just impossible, right? So I think, and by the way, there is no US worker who doesn't understand that they should save for retirement. That's been beaten into us by Fidelity year after year after year, watching my New England Patriots lose again this past weekend. But it's always there. So people know they should, but if it's simply unaffordable, they don't because they can't. And when you look at that number, that'll give you a health check very quickly on where's your workforce financially, how many people are participating, at what level, and how much do they have saved up to this point in time.
So over the past few years, we've been hearing so much about teams within various types of organizations, all different industries. They're trying to do more with less, whether that's because of financial pressures, workforce shortages, other factors, kind of unprecedented factors that we saw in the pandemic, of course, as well. So at the same time, we have this conversation going on about well-being, and those two things kind of seem to be at odds. So how can organizations prioritize well-being underneath pressure sometimes?
Am I starting? You start.
So when I think about this, it's common story, right? Hey, HR, can you also take on this? Can you also do this? And, I don't know where to put this, right? So thinking through that thread, and then also just thinking about workforce, it's much easier to retain individuals and address the well-being lens, and from a productivity perspective, keep them happy, right? Much, much easier to do that. When I think about my own organization, so it's consulting, it's high pressure, Q4 is our busy season. Oftentimes you could be working long hours, and it's perpetual and it's consistent. So when I think about the do more with less, some of the things that I've seen as being successful is we have an AI tool that's hosted on our own servers, because that's another thing. If you're putting things into ChatGPT, salaries to create job positions, et cetera, then it's a cyber component. Whereas if you host on your own server, it's much cleaner and safer. So what we've done is it's an open AI, and it allows you access to compliance resources. It can rewrite emails. It can do certain things. And then I also think that you want to empower your workforce to do it. So part of that is having open office hours to ask questions and then train and then to do modules on exactly what you're working on today. So all through the mantra of do more with less, I think empowerment, lean into technology, do the things that you like and enjoy, and then iterate those administrative tasks. And the more that you can focus on that, the better, because at the end of the day, we want to spend more time with our families, less time at work, right? So if you think through that lens and positively impact that, I think it has a profound kind of volume effect.
Yeah, the doing more with less, I'm laughing. A couple of my colleagues are here, and I'm sure they're like, yes, that is all we do is more with less. And there's constantly cuts, and there's constantly ways that you say. And what I would say is the ruthless prioritization. Yeah. And making sure that you're hearing and getting collective feedback, whether even it's anecdotal. One of the things, and this happens a lot with DEI, is there's so many things we could be doing. There's so many areas where we could be focused, and people want more and more, and we just have to be really clear about, we recognize there is more to do. This is what we are able to do. And I always love, my favorite is when someone comes with a suggestion or a project or something they want the DEI team to do. I said, that is a great idea. How can I support you and empower you in bringing that to life? And so, just being really honest about what we can and cannot do. And I feel like most employees are pretty rational in when you give them an explanation. When you say, it's not that I haven't thought about it. It's not that I don't believe in it. It's that we really can't do it right now. But here's our plan to do it. And if also being really agile in that if something comes up that's more pressing, being able to say, we're gonna take this on, but this is no longer gonna be our priority, and this is why. And that, I think, is really one of the ways that we've been trying to navigate this constant, cut. And, I think a lot of you all will realize is that HR tends to be, I feel like, the area that people are saying, let's shrink it even more. Let's shrink it even more. How more? And I would say AI tools are tremendous as far as being able to do that administrative work, and also, though, making sure you're using a closed network. I also think AI tools are tremendously valuable for those who are neurodivergent or may have some sort of disability, being able to give you a starting point and help your productivity. It also, if you use the Copilot tool, which is the Microsoft tool, they actually even have inclusion suggestions. So when you write an email, it will give you a suggestion, myself included, where I said, let's say happy birthday to the birthday girl. And I, checked it, and it said, that sounds diminutive. Like, you should say happy birthday to this woman's name. And so it was one of those just moments where it was, again, creating these dialogues and these environments that it's a great place to leverage your tools to check it.
I love the prioritization because I think we live through that as well, but we're going through a little bit of a different evolution where for so long our organization has been focused on it has to be perfect, right? It has to be to the level of detail that without question nothing's wrong on a document that I put in front of somebody. And so we've started to take that 80-20 perspective to say, are we 80% of the way there? Then are we comfortable making a decision, or do we need 100% of the information to do it? And so it's that permission to be directionally correct in our decision making so that we're not spending too much time getting to false perfection. And so that is something we've been having to give ourselves permission to do, which has been hard, because we want to have the right information. We want to stand in a room presenting something to say, here, it's all right, and be able to answer all of the questions. But we've also been teaching our teams, it's okay to say, you know what, I don't know, let me get back to you. And that's been a really hard thing for our teams to learn. It's still early on in that evolution for us.
I also love what Taylor said. I wanted to get back to that when you said Q4 is very busy for you. I think understanding the cycle of your organization is very important. And having the level of flexibility to be able to say, yes, Q4 is super, super important to us, and it's going to be very busy, and being upfront about it and creating that expectation, but also understanding and allowing your employees and showing that you have a culture of taking a break. So if a Q1 is slower, not just letting employees sprint constantly and through that, having those moments to breathe. I often find myself having the conversations with my team of, what can we deprioritize? What can we take off? Do we really need to do all of the things? Because when employees start sprinting, they just feel that this is the pace that they have to go on all the time. So I think there is a level of ownership on a leader, but also maybe on a HR department of understanding that cycle of the organization and knowing when to pause, when to take a little bit of a perspective, when to ask employees to slow down, and being very very honest about it.
Yeah, that seems like another area we've mentioned a few times today, leaders setting an example and being vulnerable, and that seems like just another area where that would benefit everybody. So we have a few minutes left here, and I wanted to make sure we touch on flexibility, both in schedule time, like we were just talking about, and also in location. This is the policies about where to work and when to work have been so top of mind at organizations the past 4+ years. And they're still tweaking them. Now, from a well-being perspective and a mental health perspective, wondering what you all think about what organizations should be thinking about considering in those policies, and maybe what you've seen, some observations you've made of what's working and what's not.
Sure, I was waiting for that question. But
Yeah.
Go first.
Yeah, I think for us, one thing that's really important, and I don't think we've gotten there fully as an organization, but we're a global organization, so emails are going to be coming in at all times, and it's really hard to set boundaries around it. One thing I've done with my team, and have been really clear, and parts of our organization have implemented policies, are truly like, you cannot send an email at this time. We can't, again, a lot of times we can't do that in a global, but the expectation being very clear up front. I may be sending you this email, but you do not need to respond to it right now. Also, just making sure, one of the things I like to role model is my calendar is open. You can see when I'm going to pick up from daycare. You can see when I'm going to get my nails done in the middle of the day, because I know that I'm going to have to work later, which I clearly have not done. So you can see those times when you're leaning into the things that I need to do to take care of myself and put my own oxygen mask on. Because if you can't role model that, then employees are going to feel exactly, like you said, that sprint, like I have to do this all the time. And so making sure that you're creating the environment that people can feel that they can pull back and take care of themselves in whatever way they need to. And I also think it's really important, is a lot of times, and I felt in my old role when I was consulting, is unless you had children, your life outside of work was not respected. And so one thing that I like to say is, I don't care what you decide to do, whether that's go to, little Tommy's baseball game, or, Susie's recital, or, which were very gendered portrayals, but, or you want to go surfing. That time is yours, and I'm going to respect it as much as if you have 2 children, if it's, whatever you need to do. So I think that that's also important, is to try and think about that time as really protected. And again, I say, I don't care what you're doing during that time. You can be staring at the wall. If that's what you need to do for your PTO today, do that.
Yeah, I love that. I think, from my perspective, in a manufacturing organization, flexibility is really hard, because you can do a lot of things, and I think in your corporate world, in your salaried roles, and then it comes to your employees on the production line. And what do you do for flexibility there, right? And how do you make sure that the culture of your organization is cohesive? So when you have flexibility is for everyone. And it comes in a different shapes and forms. What we're doing for our employees on the production lines, we're giving them more ownership and more visibility and flexibility around their schedules. So being able to swap shifts with the coworkers, being able to request shifts, being able to request, their pay time off on the fly, and providing them with tools. I think we often kind of say, okay, well, if we let them use an app on their personal phone, are we going to have to pay them for that time? Is it going to be? I think we need to be more mindful of that population of our employees as well. If we have organizations that are like mine, manufacturing organization with a big population of hourly employees, there is a level of flexibility that is expected there, and just because it's hard, we can't overlook that.
I like the idea of getting my nails done during the day, though.
You
I
should.
hadn't really thought about that, but
It's a nice lunch break.
I don't know. If I try it, I'll give you credit. The only thing I would say, adding into what my fellow panelists said, is I think it's all about knowing what your organization is that determines what the answers are to these questions. And I'm from the Bay Area, Silicon Valley. It's just different out there than it is most places. I had the great pleasure of running PayPal for a number of years, and that culture thrived off of the engagement that we had. So to your point on answering emails, I literally couldn't send out an email at 11 o'clock at night and not get a response 1 minute later. And it wasn't because I expected it, it wasn't because I needed it or wanted it. It was because the people we had were that engaged in the mission we were trying to achieve. And that's special. Right? Not every company has that, but you can create that if you put time and effort into explaining it, and explaining it again, and why, just explaining why this is so important for everybody, for all of our customers, plus people who aren't our customers today. And it's a big challenge, but if you can get your senior leadership team to embrace a different style of communication, potentially you can get more without ever even asking for it, is my sense. But you can't demand it, to your point, because if you do, then people just opt out. So.
Well, I hate to cut off the conversation, but I think we are out of time. Thank you to all the panelists for a great conversation today.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.